Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome highly respected and incredibly inspiring serial entrepreneurs, both co-founding partners and CEOs of Space Heroes, Deborah Sass and Thomas Reemer. So welcome.
Welcome. Hi.
Hello, Kieran. How are you?
Good, thanks. And thanks for your time and thanks for joining me today. So, Deborah, I'd like to start with you and obviously congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you give us some background as to how your entrepreneurial journey started?
Whoa! You know, I was selling lemonade when I was 6 on the street corner because we had a lemon tree. No, that's totally a joke. Actually, I'm going to answer that question in a slightly funny way, Kieran, because I think your listeners would appreciate the humor. When Thomas and I have been friends for 17 years, so actually I can quite comfortably say that when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I already knew Thomas, but we weren't working together until, let's say, sort of 3, 4, 5 years ago. And Thomas rang me and he said, Deborah, I want you to help me launch a global casting show where we're going to give away the biggest prize ever given out on television, a $55 million ticket for a 10-day stay to the ISS. And I was like, fuck me, that's amazing. Sign me up. I'm in. I've just got one question. And he said, what? And I said, what's the ISS? Because literally 5 years ago, I was not as into space or even as knowledgeable in space as both Thomas and I are now. But to answer your question in a, more succinctly, I think that when you're an entrepreneur, there's a couple of things that are quite apparent that most people don't really get. I mean, entrepreneurialism has been going for decades, if not hundreds of years, but we've only coined it entrepreneur, recently, let's say in the last sort of 20, 30, maybe 40 years. But in my mind, being an entrepreneur is not taking a regular salary, is not being able to go, if I don't really do my job that well today, or I don't show up today, I'm still going to get paid, because that's what the rest of the fucking world does, is they have a job, they have a salary, and they do maybe sometimes a mediocre job, maybe not. But being an entrepreneur for me was taking a risk on my own ability. And that not only paid really well sometimes, but also paid nothing most of the time.
Welcome to the real reality of entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Staying in shitty hotels, staying at people's houses because you couldn't afford a shitty hotel.
Don't even tell me about that. I know all about that. So Thomas, for you, it would obviously be nice for the audience to get a bit of background about you and how your entrepreneurial journey started, and also how you went from or transitioning from like corporate music world into doing what you're doing now in terms of Space Hero.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's always a journey, right? That is unexpected. And you can't really plan for these things, right? If you want to, plan for something, then as Deb said, you should get a job and get a salary. And with this entrepreneurial journey, you just go from thing to thing to thing to thing, right? And if you see the opportunities in front of you, then you grab them and you make the most of it, right? And again, as Deb said, most of the time you see an opportunity, but it doesn't pan out. And then sometimes it does, right? And that's the same with me. It's like I studied history and politics. And when I was finished, I was about to write a thesis. The professor invited me to do that, but then he died after 6 months, not because of me, but because he was old.
I'm so pleased to hear that.
Me too.
And I, at the same time, in the same day, actually, I got a call from a friend of mine. He said, we've set up a band and we need somebody to man the phones, right? And can you do that? And I'm like in between these emotions, and I'm like, okay, sure. And then I started, because I had no emotional connection to this, right, to book gigs for this band. And it went on to become a major success, 2 #1 albums, 4 #1 hits in Germany, kind of tours, all this kind of stuff. And I just grew into it without knowing anything about it, right? And that's the best way of learning. And it, fortunately in this case worked out. And then I expanded, right? You understand, you can do, clubs, you can book other acts, you can release albums, then when the technology changed, you looked into platforms, right? How can you release things in a more digital way? And that's exactly how it continued. And then it started to have an international dimension and so on. And then you end up at the biggest kind of challenge that you can get, is sending somebody to space. And that's really the story, right? It's a natural transition to, grow up and do more and more and more, take on more and more responsibility and just go.
But hang on, let's just track that. Booking concerts to sending a citizen astronaut. Quite a trajectory, Thomas.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a total different industry as well. Even though you want to do a reality show, it's still totally different. So just in terms of the complexities of setting up Space Hero, or like embarking on this journey, what was that process like for you? I know you said it was a past project and then you brought it back to life. So what was that transition like for you?
It was easy, to be honest with you, because, and I think that's where Debs and I are totally in sync. Although we are sending somebody to space, the project is just a similar, kind of similar structure as all the other projects we've done before. Because even if you have that famous lemonade stand, right, you have to get the lemons, you have to find a good spot, right? You have to define the pricing, you have to, get the cash in to, be able to also exchange, money when somebody gives you, like you know what I'm saying, right? And it's the same ingredients are here. You have to define what it is. You have to define the costs. You have to define the revenue channels, and you have to find the right partners to execute this with, and whoever you need, right? And that's why you might call this naive, right? But I call it actually it's kind of a childlike curiosity that you keep, and
but I
that
think
keeps
there's
you going,
something
right?
good to that, Thomas, like being a bit naive, because I think that if you went in knowing everything, then you'd maybe like be disappointed, or maybe things wouldn't work out. But I feel like I've always felt like that if there's a level of naivety, it actually works to your advantage.
It totally works to our advantage. I think every day today we learn stuff, right? And I mean, for 4 years ago, right, the whole thing was different. And I said it many times before, right? I'm looking forward to working in a company that I had never set out to build, because then you understand that the impact from other people is actually so strong that it changes while you're there, and it's already happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Deborah, you have also had a very diverse career. You've lived all over the world, from London to Perth to Australia. Do you believe that this has helped you in your journey or in your entrepreneurial career? And can you give us any examples?
Sure. I've actually also lived in Los Angeles. I've lived in Bali. I've lived in Barcelona. I've lived in Sydney.
Yes.
And I went to school in Perth. So yes, I am British, and I was born in the UK. Of course, being international gives you a completely open opportunity. And again, you could say the naivety, the blind faith, the no experience in this particular culture. And you just kind of, when I moved to Bali, in fact, I think it's when you and I had first met, or at least I just moved back to Spain. Yeah, I just left Bali. I mean, I literally did see that silly movie, Eat, Pray, Love, and I went, that's it, I'm done. I sold everything, I packed everything up, and I left my job in Los Angeles, a nice, very nice 6-figure paying job, and I went, that's it, I'm moving to Bali. And I did. And what it allowed me to do is completely and utterly just start again. I mean, I had nothing. I had 2 suitcases. I knew one person. And of course, I'd been to Bali many times for a holiday. But I can tell you right now, living somewhere is highly different than going on holiday. And living in a third world country is actually really challenging. And it was something I couldn't do. I did it for almost 2 years and I was like, fuck this. This is like, you know, the corruption, the lack of structure. I was like, no, I'm going back to Europe. See ya, Asia.
Yes. So with regards to, and this is a question for both of you, with regards to some of your biggest lessons and learnings within your entrepreneurial journey, what would you say? I mean, there's obviously been multiple, but what are the ones that stand out the most for both of you?
Yes, please.
Oh, thanks. Actually, it's an easy one for me because we have been asked this question quite a few times now. For me, it's about not waiting till everything is perfect. It never happens. The deck's always going to change. The pitch is always going to change. The tech's going to change. Just get that thing out. Get it moving. Get talking. Get, you know, literally put your product, put your service, put your idea out there, because you will wait your life to have the perfect app, the perfect product,
and
the perfect
no
service.
Such thing.
And there's no such thing. There's exactly no such thing. So in my mind, being an entrepreneur is literally about taking a risk every single time I open my mouth.
Yes. And for you, Thomas?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned is that you, despite acquiring a lot of expertise, you need to stay open to unusual things and situations, right? And that is very hard. It's not only that the expertise of decades worth of being an entrepreneur kicks in, it's also that you just get older, right? So you get set in your ways.
Yes.
And fighting that is so worth it, right? Because very often, you know, I look at stuff that comes from the company suggestions and I'm like, I've seen it before. I know how this is going to end, but then it ends differently. Yes. And you're like surprised and you're like, okay. And so I've learned to be quiet with my opinion on these things and let it run and see the outcome, right? And it has proven to be very, 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 very positive energy in my own life. And I cherish that now.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to the next question. I want to actually talk around leadership, and having grown up, well, for you, Deborah, as a woman of color, what?
I'm what? I'm not white? Sorry.
We try to be politically correct, right?
Shit, I'm not black? What are you talking about?
So as a woman of color, what progress do you believe has been made to change not only women in leadership, but also for women of color? And what do you believe still needs to happen to change the current narrative and to create a space and opportunity for women of color in more leadership roles in order to change this narrative?
It's a loaded question on so many levels, and let's like try and shift the paradigm. Yes. First of all, Thomas and I have talked about this for many years, and one of the most interesting parts of being a co-CEO is that neither one of us look at each other as he's a white guy or I'm a brown female. We're just the two leaders that lead by example. Now, it just so happens that when you put us on a stage or a photograph, it is apparent that we have different cultures, different backgrounds, different ethnicities. Yes. And as I said on many interviews before, that there's no way that I've ever defined myself as a female woman of color. I just like hustled. I just did what I needed to do. I just got certain things done. And it was everybody else who's defined me. Right. So in that regard, how do you shift the narrative by not even having the narrative anymore, by just leading by example? I mean, the fact is that those days are over. I know that it's still happening. I know that there is a huge inequality in leadership, in pay structure, in Fortune 500 companies. But let's look at things like, just for instance, blockchain compared to banking. Banking was by definition a white man's Western world, institution. And in fact, one of our investors, in fact, two of our investors are female ex-bankers, and one is a female of color. She was a banker for 20, 30 years. And we also spitball about this because it's such an unusual. The thing is that you want to inspire people, but you don't want to pigeonhole people. And it's a very hard dynamic. And in fact, I think I'd like to hand over to Thomas, who actually is more of a feminist than I am in this regard and is a huge supporter of all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually hard to say that, the portion of being a woman of color, right? There are like two elements that are limiting in this today's world in there. It's the woman aspect and the color aspect, right? And so just the woman aspect, which, you might assume that we don't need to have to talk about it today, but we actually do, because every day we experience, reactions to what we are doing from people that are living in the past. And it's so, I wrote it recently about it because I grew up in a very different way, in a communist country where the equality was a necessity because women were, needed in the work process, right? It came with a lot of rights, which means, that when the wall came down and so to say, those rights were rolled back, right? It was heartbreaking to see because the achievement that my mother and my sister and every woman that had lived in that country, had managed to achieve was brilliant, right? And to see this being rolled back and people losing their jobs because they were women, and it was expected that they stay home rather than the husband, right, who earns more money, it was bad to see. And now you find yourself, right, after 40 years, still fighting this. It is an uphill battle. I think we're making very good progress, though. I think it needs a lot of more activity by men to really help that, right? But men are threatened. And when men are threatened, they tend to threat other people, right? And it's like they don't understand that, the future could be awesome because you are, you are winning something rather than losing. And, it's what we thrive for as a business partnership, Debs and I. And I hope that we can really be that example and spread the message about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to Space Hero and everything, and in terms of changing the narrative, because like Deborah says, and you say, we need men to also step up to the plate and really, support women to be able to help change the narrative. It's not about male versus female, because we all have to work together. So within Space Hero and what it is that you're doing, and even the team or the people that you collaborate with, how in your process are you guys going to be doing, or what is it that you're doing to change or to help change that narrative?
Yeah, Debs was brilliant because she's always pushing us forward in getting teams and getting people and getting the right people together, right? And from the start, it was not even a discussion, but when you look at our website, you can find most of the people that work with us. Yeah. And it's a brilliant site, right? Because we figured while doing that website, by the way, with all the headshots and, the names that, wow, it is a brilliant, diverse bunch of people, not because we needed to fulfill a quota, right? This quota business is also so awful. But because it has been growing like that, right? And naturally, and that's how it should be, right? You prepare the soil for how things grow, right? Debs and I, we are farmers. We know what we're talking about in this regard, and you create that atmosphere, right? And so that is possible, and certainly something that we pay attention to in how we grow. The perspective that you gain from a diverse input is really spellbinding, right? Even people who say, I'm not racist, right? They sit there and say that I'm not racist, right? But they never speak to a person of a different color.
Yeah.
And so they don't actually know, right? As we have this problem right now with the British royal family, right? They say, of course, they say they're not racist because they never speak to somebody, you know, who is of a different color, right? And you know, you can't even claim that because you just simply don't know. It's a lack of knowledge, or in their case, I would say ignorance.
But do you also think that it's, because this is something that I had a thought around, is do you not believe that people only understand within the realm of their own perspective, of their own reality, that is, yeah.
They do, but the world is getting smaller.
Yeah.
So your mobile phone is bringing the world into your home, right? So you know a lot more than people, you know, 10 years ago, people 20 years ago, people 100 years ago. Somebody said, I think, you know, we have the knowledge of information of one day today is the knowledge of an entire lifetime 100 years ago, right? And so you can't claim anymore that, like, you know, what I don't see is what I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore, right? So everybody has to step up and create this world that we all want to continue living in or live in the future. And that includes watching out for everybody, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, the amount of phone calls that I've done recently where there is a him or a he or a she or a her, and I kind of laugh because, of course, I'm looking at a guy or I'm looking at a girl. Like, for me, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
But I understand that it is a very important part of the process that, you know, as our generation, and let's say we're all in the same sort of age bracket, as we get older, what is shifting is that whole entire what we knew, as in Thomas's children and my nephew, who's like 4, right? By the time he gets to 25, he would never have understood what a record player is, what maybe like having to search for something on Google. That may actually, he thinks of something and it already delivers him what before he even, so, you know, this type of technology exists and it's being moved forward in quite a dramatic way. And having this, I mean, we call it binary now, but maybe there won't even be gender fluidity. Maybe it'll actually just be human beings. And it's not about color. It's not about educational level. It's not about money. It's actually about, you know, what have you got that I can barter with? You know, I've got chickens, you've got goats. And maybe it goes back down to basic things like that. And of course, Space Hero is a reflection of inclusivity that we don't have on Earth. Because when you go into space, you actually are inclusive, not exclusive.
Exclusive, absolutely.
And the only way you can survive is to work with your fellow, whatever you want to call them, crew, teammates, astronauts. And if you don't, and if there's any kind of gender, religion, any kind of barriers, you all fucking die. That's it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it.
Yeah.
You don't want that to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're doing something with Space Hero that we call the Space ID.
Yes.
So every viewer has actually the chance to sign up for a Space ID, right? It's something that they can give themselves. And it is something that they can use as an identity in the coming decades, right? Yeah. First of all, connected to Space Hero, but maybe later to other things as well. And that ID is completely independent of any race, religion, or gender. And, you know, it makes it a compelling concept for us because we don't want to be defined by these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Deborah, both you and Thomas have traveled the globe over a period of 2 years and are now on track to becoming an impactful global project. So can you share with us more about what this means and about or being part of creating this project to empower and lead by example in creating leadership and opportunities for women?
Whoa, that's a big question, Kieran. I might need you to explain that or break it down. The first part of your question I actually thought was about how we are going to be impactful, and I'm going to answer it by we are let's say a TV show because that's what we're used to being able to label it as. But actually what we are is a media organization that will allow anybody who has a mobile phone, which is 3/4 of the world, to be able to access parts of the content to apply, to communicate, to have their Space ID will all be run from the mobile phone. That will be the content delivery network. And that is impactful in itself because first of all, no longer do we really have appointment viewing like we used to when we were kids. You know, Friday night, we're all getting ready to watch whatever it was. I don't even remember, Buck Rogers or something, you know, and it was on, you know, once a week. Yeah. But now you have the ability to consume and digest media whenever you want to. And that, again, shifts the paradigm of the control. I give you one example. I'm digressing, but it's an interesting point. When Thomas and I did the pitches to the global broadcasters, who will remain nameless, but everybody knows who they are, 90% of everybody in those rooms were white men. It was fascinating that these guys, and they're all about the same age. So I was like, wow, I mean, how do you plan programming for a whole entire country of all these different races, genders, religions, whatever, and you're all the same kind of demographic? It was kind of bizarre. But now talking about in regards to women, well, again, we lead by example. No longer does it have to just be you on your own, or do you need to not be equal to your fellow man? And I say that as in, you know, Thomas and I are co-CEOs. He owns half of my life and I own half of his life.
Amazing.
One day I'm gonna regret saying that.
So I mean, it's like, sorry, so to jump in, you know, it's like whenever people, Wakanda, what was that movie? Black Panther, right? And you see the reactions of people saying, I would have never thought I would see a black superhero on screen, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, it has never been done before. And as a white person, right, talking from personal experience, you know, in the past, I could have never relayed to that comment, right? Because emotionally, for me, it was always normal to see white people, and then you know you understand that you know my journey into understanding this better started in the 90s actually, when I read Miles Davis's autobiography. And I could not believe what I was reading, right? A hero for me personally, being under such oppression from a system that we actually all cherished, right? At the time, naively, you said America is great, right? And then I was like, I had to put it together and really understand what it was and how he was also talking about, you know, the other, you know, the famous jazz musicians who are the basis of how we consume music today, right? And what happened to them, it was awful. And, you know, and then continuing from that, you start to understand what the contribution actually was, and making that point at the time, which I'm sure for most of the people was annoying, because they're like, can you stop talking about racism, right? Yeah. And then you have South Africa, where you come from, right? And we, you know, Nelson Mandela in East Germany, wasn't a hero. That's actually very funny, because people think, you know, communism is connected to progressive topics, right? But it's as small, you know, as everything else. And so when it came to Mandela, who was somebody that didn't fit in and that was against the system, you know, the communists couldn't tolerate that, because, you know, that could have been a good example for people to rise up. But when he was freed, right, and I remember that moment clearly, because, you know, the years 1990, 1991 were so significant, you know, fall of the wall and Mandela's freedom. It was, you know, eye-opening. And then today, I still think that we assume too many things that are so hurtful, right? And that we claim positions in media, and Deb said it, right? I mean, 90% of these people were of the same ilk, right? How can they define a diverse program? They can't. No. It's like, you know, it's not possible. And we want to contribute to a very, very different thing. and really get the world together and united. I mean, technology always claims that, right? Facebook claims it's a global platform, but it's not. It's a siloed platform, right? It has an American Facebook. It has a Facebook in India, but, you know, rarely do you see American people having friends in India, right? Do they talk? They don't.
No.
So it stays the same. It's a mirror of our siloed society, and the true global unity hasn't happened yet, right? And we don't want to sound like, you know, hippie DJs from Ibiza, but it is, you know, but it is important that we make a point about this, right? So we are working with people from all over the world, as we said, but we also put an effort in you know, the right training and getting them also to believe in themselves, right? Believe that these things are really happening, that they are really possible, that the chances are real, and that we will support them all the way through, right? And that is the work that we are doing, right? We do it because we love it, because it also is beneficial to our organization, right? So we're not just tree hugging. We are also having, you know, the success of Space Zero, you know, always in the back of our mind, because ultimately, you know, Space Zero is just, you know, a concept that is impactful, and we are the messengers of it, but its success will be, you know, good for a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. And this is obviously a long-term project that you guys are obviously both committed to, you know, for as long as...
It's the last job that we'll probably have. But I want to add something to what Thomas said to give you, from an entrepreneurial point of view, I mean, how many entrepreneurs do we know that built a company, sold it, and then became investors? Yeah. So I go back to one of the reasons why we started doing this, and the TV show was never the main goal. It was actually a sort of afterthought of what Thomas's initial idea was and when we started working together. But what we know we can do, and we've been able to do this through the space industry and making them stakeholders, is that right now in the world, there are 72 countries that have space agencies. NASA is only one of them. Now, imagine we work with over 50 of those already. I mean, it's incredible. The people we know and the relationships we have is incredible. But look at this. Now you have a global stage where you can invest, inspire, and engage with many different nationalities, all on the same, let's say, the hook being space. But the stage is, you know, a global television show. But wouldn't it be cool is if we're all having access to all these different cultures, to music, to technology, to goods and services from all these different countries, all in the same place. So no, I don't have to go to Facebook in India to find out about what's happening in the science and technology world in India, because it'll all be a part of Space Hero with Brazil, with Japan, with the UK, with America. And yes, America has that halo effect, but actually, and this is so normal, right? What actually puts us together is much more similar than what takes us apart, you know, what makes us different.
100%. So in saying that, obviously you've highlighted that your mission is to change the narrative, but COVID-19 has obviously turned our world inside out and upside down. So how has this impacted you, and has it created more opportunities for both of you, or how have you had to adapt and change within this current environment?
Well, the company was awesome, right? Because the last trip that we had was also one of the last trips in March 2020 to the United States. One of the last preparation trips to go into deals with other companies, right? So for the past year, we've been in deal-making stage. And you know how that is, right? You need to, you know, talk to people, you need to set up, you know, writings and documents, and they go back and forth, and reiterations, signatures, and so on. And that, you know, has been the past year for us, and we are nearly out of that stage and going into pre-production, right? Yeah. And that is then the stage where everything else is happening. And it means, you know, maybe it coincides with COVID ending, maybe it doesn't. Luckily for us, you know, we used it to our advantage. Debs and I, we never like to, you know, waste anything, right? I mean, we flew around incessantly, that's right. And COVID gives you a pause on that. And we are, establishing a sustainability kind of mechanism for Space Hero to see what can be achieved, right? We don't just want to talk about it. We want to be achieving something, but we are also realistic that with a TV show like that at the end of it, you blow a rocket into space. I mean, the sustainability curve might be complicated, but it's better to analyze it and do something and try to achieve something, maybe do it better next season, then do nothing, right? And we are also not office people. I think that was the biggest blessing for us because we could just stay home and work, which is brilliant, right? And everybody else around you does the same. And that the world must understand that is a blessing for anything, right? You see cities that we all, cherish and love, like London, Paris, New York, where all these things. I mean, these cities are being killed by office space in the inner city space because nothing survives outside it, right? No. And this will be reversed, and I'm very happy about it personally. But Debs, I think you have a similar experience, right?
In the beginning, Thomas and I were expectedly nervous, right? We had just completed a global trip. We were in heavy dialogue with NASA, with the ticket provider, with, media companies, and all of a sudden, like the airport was shut and we were all told to stay home. And so in some ways, we were like, holy shit, how do we continue? Like, we're supposed to be in a room with these people. How do you get to know them? How do you take them out for lunch? How do you network? How do you build a relationship? And actually what Thomas has said is the highlight for both of us is that we just went, what have we got? We got Zoom. Yes. We were already on Zoom before, right? So we were on Zoom a year or so before the rest of the world had to do it because we've always been, So, okay, what have we got? We've got time. Fine. Yes. You know what? We both got time. We've both got knowledge, and we have basic, in some ways, limited relationships, but we can build on them. And so literally Thomas and I started March exactly a year ago today. Wow. We started with setting up calls, like dozens of calls every single day with all the people we had met to just make sure, hey, get on Zoom. Half of them didn't even know what Zoom was. We had to drag these motherfuckers onto the platform, and they were like, no, it doesn't work. We were like, yes, we've been using it for over a year. It works. Just get with the program, right? Yeah. So now there's all these different systems, but fundamentally we sat on the phone exactly like we're doing now. We would have a coffee, we would have a glass of water, we'd have a scotch at the end of the day, and we talk to our vendors, our stakeholders, our investors, our potential investors. We raised more money last year. We did all of the relationships are even better than they were a year ago because we spent the time getting to know people. We spent the time communicating with people, and we had the time to be able to do that. And very quickly, Kieran, we found out that, funnily enough, all the people we wanted to meet with that we needed to fly to see were all at home as well. Yes. So everybody was able to meet with us because nobody had gone anywhere.
Anyway, and don't you find that also there were less distractions? Because I sometimes feel like when you're flying all over and you're doing all these things, you don't actually get as much work done, and it's not as effective. So So within that, what would you say have been for both of you, and I'm sure maybe there's been collaborative things within Space Hero and what you guys are doing, but also before you guys came together to do Space Hero, what would you say some of your biggest career highlights have been?
Before Space Hero?
Yeah, all together. Is there something that really specifically stands out for you?
Well, it's not necessarily a career highlight, but I can say that there was a 2-week period a year ago, I think, where Thomas and I went from London to Russia to watch a rocket launch with Roscosmos, the Russian version of NASA. And then we flew over to Cape Canaveral, where we actually saw an American launcher. And then we went and met. Then we went over to SpaceX in LA, in Hawthorne, and we walked the studio. No, not the studio, the floor, the factory floor. Yeah. So we and also when we were in Cape Canaveral, we also went to Houston and saw Boeing. So we basically went from Russia to the two biggest American rocket launchers in the same 2 weeks. Now that was absolutely outstanding.
Wow. So what would you say?
Agreed.
What would you say within that? I mean, I know you can't always divulge information from within, but was there one thing was it the launch itself, or was it having a tour of the factory, or the operations and where things were? Like, was there any specific thing?
During that trip, right, we also made a little stopover in Beijing. And
I forgot about that.
My old neighborhood. I showed Debs around my old neighborhood where I used to live, and that was quite the moment too. And it's just you see all these different things. We tried to cross the Russian-Chinese border by foot, but it wasn't allowed, so we had to take the plane. And I mean, we went to Vladivostok, all these kind of things, right? I mean, the real Far
and
East.
South Korea. We went to Seoul as well, didn't we? In that.
That's right. And we had some sushi in Vladivostok in like a communist blockhouse that some taxi took us to. And it was all these things are like amazing stuff. That's why you do this stuff, right? That's why you are an entrepreneur, because these things are life.
Yes. And
actually, one day we should literally just talk about the food, because we went from Michelin star restaurants to sushi in Russia to eating with our hands off paper, like in Houston at a ribs place where they I mean, America, right? They sell you the food by the weight. Like, you want a kilo of potato salad? We're like, what? And they and the plates were pieces of paper, because you're eating the ribs, and it was, I mean, fascinating.
Amazing. Amazing. So what would you say are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs?
Passion.
Okay. That was easy.
That is absolutely, there's nothing to add to that, except for try over the core. I mean, everybody always talks about the young people being entrepreneurs, right? And when you talk about the young successful people, there are actually not many compared to the young that are not successful, because experience, right, is highly underrated in the West. It's different in the East, right? In Asian countries or in Africa, where there's an age hierarchy, and that has some reasoning, because somebody that is older, right, might know a little bit more than you do when you start out. Yeah. It comes with respect, and that kind of respect is always missing in the West. But the point is, the reason for that is because a lot of old people who are unsuccessful in the West have become very bitter. Yeah. And you need to save those disappointments from your life and not be bitter, right? That's like, it's a hard thing to work on, but you have to try to achieve it, because you won't be happy with being bitter, and you won't be able to lead. You won't be able to pass on your experience, because people just don't want to see that in anybody else, right? And so I think not getting bitter is one of the achievements that I actually managed to achievements to achieve, to reach, whatever. Reach, and so don't get bitter.
Yeah. And then what legacy would both of you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered? Because I know some people don't like the word legacy. So how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, for me, it's an easy one, to inspire lots of people that potentially don't look like, that are different in the way that they look, to be more into science and technology and engineering, because Space Hero made it sexy and cool. Yeah. We actually made we made a fascinating subject, but also behind the scenes, it's very dry, it's very technical, it's very complicated, and it's very elite. I mean, there are only a certain number of rocket scientists and astronauts. I mean, just the study and the criteria is, it's the reason why Space Hero will be such an impact and a powerful, inspirational vehicle, because we are making space, science, technology, engineering, math sexy, cool, and open to everybody.
Yes.
If more people understand that you can survive drastic changes, then, we have achieved a lot, right? And a drastic change could be that you're picked as being the space hero, right? Or one of the 24 finalists, or achieving something. Or, later on when we will, foster education and entrepreneurship, and will support people, right? That, you understand you can survive drastic change, and that you should thrive for it. Because one thing's very clear: if this world stays as it is, it's going to be gone, maybe in our lifetime, right? And that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So just one question around Space Hero. So once, the candidates have been selected and, everything's in process or progress, what is the objective in terms of, so they say, however many finalists end up going to space, or if it's just one, I don't know really how the result will turn out, but is the objective to get them to help go and do research up in space, or is it just that they would go up there and have the experience? So just to get an idea of, other objectives just besides sending somebody to space.
Yeah, for sure. There is a mission behind it, right? So we never just wanted to send somebody up there who is zipping cocktails and watching the other astronauts work. So it must be a mission, and it will be a mission, and it will be something that there will be a science experiment competition going on at the same time, a global one. We want every school and university on this planet to send in their things that they couldn't send to space so far, right? Because they might have a good chance with us, and we want to showcase these initiatives and these things, right? And another part of that mission will be communication, because the connection to this person will be so strong that whatever they say, people will want to hear, right? So the Space Hero on station will communicate a lot directly with people on Earth throughout that mission, to talk about what's happening, and also reaching into, we are used to presidents saying hi to astronauts, right? But we also want to have, school kids saying hi to astronauts while they're on station. Yeah. And it's directed at them, right? Because that's an inspiration. People thrive off these things, right? Because for decades, they think back to it when the Space Hero was talking to them from the ISS, right? Directly addressing things. And that would be an important part of the journey too.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to media and publicity, just out of interest, I know you guys have started, getting some media and some exposure. So do you think that this will open other opportunities, to get further investment for what you guys are doing? And what else do you anticipate or expect to benefit in terms of media or building other relationships through the media?
So, most of it, right? Because we've been talking about it, and the challenge is to reach deeply into regions that are underserved. Yeah. And because, for the rest, we have, it's easy, right? In the West, you can reach anybody, but you see the Dear Moon mission by Maezawa, right? And he communicates through two main channels, which is Twitter and LinkedIn. And then you look at the top 15 of people who applied for his mission, and there's not a single African country there, right? And you're like, and the reason is because those channels are not prominent in Africa. Yeah. And so that needs to be changed. We want Space Hero to be literally everywhere, and need to elicit the support for that as well, because not everybody can cover everything.
No, absolutely. So just the last thing, obviously, is what is the one thing that you guys want people to know about Space Hero? And as entrepreneurs, what is the one key piece of advice that you would want to impart to those that are listening to this podcast today? And also how, if people would like to connect with you, what are the platforms that they can connect with you?
I'll answer the last question and leave the first question to Thomas. But the last bit is simple. We have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, and we have LinkedIn. And anybody can feel free to follow us, to support us on any of those platforms. We also have a website, spacehero.org.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Thank you.
Try to become an insider. You can sign up through the website, right? And it gives you really the inside track. And also, you know, we want to try to be as accessible as possible. I know it's a big thing to say because already it's a lot, but I always hated it in the past when you thought of wanting to do something and you knew you could never reach this person, right? It was like you didn't even try, and that shouldn't be the signal. And what should people, the one thing that people should know about Space Hero is it's coming. And that is the most important message.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining today. And hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you all are in this Space Hero journey.
Thank you for having us, Karen.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.